when you wrote Watch My Back, you discovered that people held on to grudges. And as you said, like 30 years later, they would still relive a moment.
Like it was yesterday.
30 years ago, yeah. And tell us a story about when you went into
the Chinese.
Yeah. and just tell us how long ago. I mean, like how the time gap between.
Well, I wrote the book, and of course, I was unsparing. I wrote about the good stuff and the bad stuff, and the criminals and the people that attacked me. I outed them and said what I really thought of them, and I didn't really care. I use pseudonyms and disguise people as much as I can. But people know, some of the people, unless you put a photograph of them and an arrow saying this is you, they wouldn't have recognised themselves. But other people knew it was them. And weren't very happy about my depiction of them, I wrote the book and cleansed myself by writing the book and the play and doing stuff, and then like 20 years later I'm stood in a Chinese takeaway, gone from a health food, of course, and I just feel this weight beside me, and I look over and it's a guy that I had 3 run-ins with 20 years before, 3 run-ins and 1 massive fight, and as soon as he just turned and looked at me, he was a big guy and very violent guy. As soon as he looked at me, his eyes watered straight away, and he was just full of emotion. And he said to me, "What you wrote about me in that book wasn't true." And I said, "It was true, but it was a long time ago." But I knew he wanted to go. I knew he wanted to fight, and I stood there with him. I went and sat down, and he was just bristling. And then the most miraculous thing happened. He was bristling and he was going to kick off. He was going to go. And suddenly this kid wandered in, this little girl, took his hand and said, "Daddy, Mum's waiting for you in the car." And they just disappeared. He never took his food. It just disappeared. And it was like, I always say that, when children appear on the scene, it's always a sign of God. He always appears in the form of a child. But so this monster, it was a daddy, he'd held his hand and took him out. But for him it was yesterday. So I had to be careful after Watch My Back came out, especially when I let go of the violence and I was no longer fighting. You couldn't just go into a pub, because people would be very pleased to see you and sit with you, and they'd want their photograph taken. But within 2 or 3 beers, a lot of them would be looking at you and going, "I don't see it." And then other people would come in with their grudges. So you didn't put them in that position. You just didn't. So I tended to meet up with old friends at funerals and weddings, but didn't go to the party afterwards. I didn't allow that situation to develop,
And you're a totally different person at that point. I mean, 20 years later, we think that we evolve and we change our perceptions, and some people get stuck.
Oh, he was still the same. He was still an alcoholic. Yeah. He was still, emotional about what happened. But this was a guy that, when I had the fight with him, he'd been barred from this place, and they'd asked me to come and remove him. But he put a glass in the barman's face, disfigured him for life. He threw a petrol bomb into one of the pubs where he used to work. It was, you know what I mean? How he couldn't see that he wasn't a nice guy. Yeah. Just because you take your mum shopping on a Sunday and you're nice with your kids, it doesn't make you a nice guy. Everyone said to me, when he's sober, he's lovely. I said, I've never seen him sober. And he was a charismatic guy. I knew him before this. I knew him when we were kids, and he was a very dynamic and charismatic guy, and he could have a fight, but he was not a good man, and that's what people like me were paid for. We were paid to ask these people to leave. Did I tell you I beat him the first time I fought him? I beat him with a baseball cap.
Yes.
I went into the pub, and they couldn't get him out. He wouldn't go, and like I said, they were all frightened of him. And I went over to him and I said, "Come over here." And he was with all his mates. I separated him from his friends, and he walked over, and I took my hat off and threw it across the room. He goes, I'm going. And that was it.
Yeah.
That worked twice. First time I had a confrontation with him, I asked him to leave. He said, "No, I'm not leaving." He said, "I'll leave." I said, "No, you're leaving." I said, "It's not a discussion, you're leaving." He goes, "I'll leave after this drink." I said, "No, you won't leave after this drink, you'll leave now." He goes, "Okay." And he got to the door and he said, "I'll come back." I said, "Don't come back." I said, "I'm here now. You don't need to come back." I said, "If you want to fight, let's me and you do it on the pavement. You leave your friends here, I'll leave my friends there. Let's go." This was just a psychological fight.
Yeah.
And he just got into the taxi and went. So then the third time, none of that worked. I tried all of that, none of it worked. It was just a physical fight. And then it was, but he was such a violent guy, you couldn't give him anything. And then 20 years later I meet him, and he's like, let's go again.
Reliving it.
Yeah, he's still there. He's still angry. Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that cap story, and it was the person who introduced me to you before I'd met you told me that story, and it fascinated me. Yeah. He was saying people win fights by taking off their watch as they're turning, round. Yeah. Didn't someone put in a mouth guard as they turned away?
Yeah, Danny, my friend Danny Donut, we called him, because he ran a donut store, and of course he did.
Danny psychological.
But yeah, he would just go, and they would go, "What? We're going."
Yeah, it's all psychological. Doing up the sleeves as you turn around. Doing up your laces.
Taking off a jacket. Yeah. Some just saying, "Hold that drink for me." John Anderson was a master of it. I remember him facing a guy once who was a monster, proper fighter, and he just said to him, the guy was kicking off, and he fronted everybody in town. This guy was a rugby player, and John said to him, "Okay, let's go then." And he goes, "Yeah, I'm ready." And John knew the psych hadn't worked, so he goes, "Tell you what, just stop. Let's go around the corner, do this off cameras, because it's going to get bloody." And the guy went, whoa, let's talk about this. So it's, like I said, you talk about metaphysics and about the use of Kotodama Gaku, the use of sound. So we used to use sound, gestures, mudras. We used to use them to diffuse fights, to trigger adrenaline, to trigger the flight instinct. We used to do all sorts of things. We didn't know we were doing mudras. We didn't know we were doing Kotodama Gaku, but the power of sound. I used to do it quite loud and make myself very big. And John would, what I'd do first is I'd make myself very small. I'd let them think they'd already won, and then I would make myself very big. I'd double or triple my size, and with the use of sound and with the use of mudras. But John sometimes would just lean in, because John was a powerful guy. So he could he was squatting 5 plates. He was benching 4 plates. He was curling 4 plates. He could curl 220. And so when he grabbed some, and he could box. So when he grabbed people, they felt his power. I mean, he was the most, the grip on him was incredible. So he would just put his hand on their head gently, and then let the weight fall on, and then whisper to them, and then they would just go.
Yeah, and then you just think I don't want
to
hit that.
It's only when you look back and you go, oh, that's really interesting. We were using sound. We learnt to master sound. But we also used to talk people down with sound as well. We used to use sound in a pacifying way. So if someone was really adrenalised, we would use sound and suggestion to pacify them, or sometimes sound and suggestion to frighten them. So, one of the things we used to do is, I used to call it time travel. So I would say to somebody, you want to kick off here, this is my front room. So I said, I'll tell you what to do. So if you kick off here, I'm going to find out where you work, I'm going to find out where you live, and I'm going to come round your house when you're having tea with your mum. I'll come to your front room. And they would go, and what you would do is you would project them out of their body and place them in the future, and then they would be yanked back to their body, and they'd go, I don't want that, and I'd just, well, step away then. So it was doing it for their sake, because it might be a factory worker. It doesn't mean he can't kill you. Loads of people are killed by drunk factory workers. Might be a young kid looking for a reputation. It might be just someone that's quite a big noise in his area. It might be someone that's just fell out with his wife and he's got kids. You don't want to be fighting with people. So you would use these things for their benefit, not for yours. If it was going to be physical, it was going to be physical, and it was going to be physical quickly, because you would read it and you would know. So you wouldn't try these techniques unless you felt there was room to save them from the physical. Which
brings us really well, actually, on to chapter 9, because this was your trip to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
To teach all this, what you were saying, to Chuck Norris.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, you were doing things that you weren't quite aware. I mean, it was just what you were doing. You had developed a skill.
I started teaching it, and I started sending videos out, but the truth was resonating everywhere around the world. But talking about fear, talking about preemption, talking about the scruffy elements of martial arts, talking about posturing, the use of sound.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realise till many years later, it landed with John Will. John Will, he's like a legendary BJJ guy. He's one of Higan Machado's senior teachers.
Right.
And he'd read the stuff, and he gave it to Richard Norton, who was a martial arts film star, and he was Chuck Norris's friend. And he took it to America and gave it to Chuck Norris. And Chuck Norris said, would he come on our course? So they got in touch with me and said, will you come and teach in Las Vegas? The moment I was asked, I didn't want to go. I suddenly felt out of my depth, because I knew that the Machados were teaching on this course, Benny Urquidez was teaching on this course. It was 500 of the top black belts in America in his system, and I just suddenly felt like this factory worker, this local guy. I just feel as though I wasn't equipped for it, and I had a lot of fear. And then people started suggesting it was a setup. You're going to go over there, they're going to challenge you, they won't like you, they won't, there's all these kind of things coming through. So I started to try and self-sabotage it. I didn't want to say I'm scared to go, so I said, well, you'd have to pay me this much to come. And they goes, yeah, we'll pay that. And I said, well, I'll need a Yuki. You'll have to pay for the Yuki to come as well. And they go, yeah, we'll pay for a Yuki. I said, well, I can't come over for 4 days for a seminar. It's Las Vegas. I said, it's a long way. I said, I'd have to come over for 10 days. So they paid for 10 days. They paid for my flights. They paid me a lot of money to teach. Then Sharon said she didn't want to come. Sharon was my Yuki, but she was also who I leaned on. And I listened to her voice. She was the voice of reason, She was the person that would stop me going off on mad money-making sprees, printing T-shirts with dogs on or something, and say, you should be back here writing. Don't be worried about doing all that. So she didn't want to come. She said, I can't come. She was too nervous to come. So I just thought, I know I was being invited to the world stage, and I knew that because there was a lot of fear, a lot of opposition, I needed to go. So I spoke to my friend Rick Young, and Rick Young was doing a lot of teaching for me and Peter at the time, and he was also teaching me privately. He was teaching me, I'm not a BJJ player, but Rick was teaching me some BJJ because I was doing some judo, and Rick used to come and stop at my house, and I spoke to him about it. I said, listen, people are saying that I'm not going to be welcome over there. I'll go over there and he just goes, it's nonsense. He said, it's nonsense. He said, they'll love you. You'll go over and they'll welcome you. And he said, it will be the best experience of your life. And he said, and you're being invited. He said, I'm not being invited. This is what Rick said. He said, I'm not being invited to that kind of thing because I'm doing JKD. You're doing something completely new. You're offering something new. There's something new to be said. That's why they want you there. So I just went. Then when I got there, of course, I realised it was just another class in another part of the world full of lovely people who just wanted to learn. They were fantastic, amazing people.
Just go back a bit before you went out there, because you said that you were going to have to stand in front of some of your idols, the Machado and Benny, the Jet, and you were going to tell them kicking doesn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to be crazy to do jiu-jitsu on the street.
Yeah.
How did you process that? How did you feel?
Well, that was a big worry because I know they were teaching, so we were sharing a teaching platform, and I had this huge respect for Benny and for the Machados, but I knew what I was teaching was immediate, visceral, explosive self-defense. So I was teaching avoidance, escape, loopholing, posturing, and if it became physical, I was teaching preemption. And I was saying that kicking makes you very vulnerable in that environment, and grappling in that environment is deadly because you're never fighting one person. You always presume you're fighting more than one, and you always presume they're armed because most of the time they are. And
you'd lost friends in similar situations, didn't you?
Yeah, I'd lost friends who'd gone to the ground and got stabbed, got stamped on, and just they go to the ground and then just someone passing by would just hoof them in the head, kick their teeth out. So we knew in that environment, it wasn't a match fight environment. We knew we never went to the ground. If you went to the ground, there was a fair chance you might die. Not because it's not a great art, because I spent a lot of time in the grappling arts myself. So I was worried that I was going to go over and I was going to teach my stuff, and it was contradicting what a lot of other people were saying.
You were going to offend.
I was worried that I would offend them, but obviously, as it turned out, they were much bigger than that. Higan Machado, because one of my students in America was the chief instructor for self-defense in Los Angeles in the LAPD. So he knew Higan, and he trained privately with him. So he introduced me to Higan, and Higan did a private lesson for me, literally on the spot, there and then in the middle of this hall. And Benny Urquidez made a beeline for me and was the most fantastic guy. I had dinner with the Machados and with Benny and with Benny's wife, who's a great granddaughter of Geronimo. And Benny's wife, I'd never met her before. She'd never heard of me, but the moment she saw me, she just made a beeline for me. She kept looking at me, and she just sat with me at dinner. Sham was here, Benny was there, and she was sat next to me with a hand on my neck for half an hour, reading my spirits, telling me what was going to happen and how I was guided, because she's a shaman. And I said, she said, your spirits are around you now, they're with you here now. And I said, and are they telling me I'm doing, am I going in the right direction? And she looked at these spirits and she started laughing, because it's like, you're in Las Vegas teaching for Chuck Norris, of course you're going in the right direction. You sat at dinner with the Machados, who were the most gentle people. They weren't threatened by what I was teaching. They knew it was in a context, and obviously they're confident enough not to be threatened by that. And Benny didn't care anyway. Benny just wanted to do loads of photographs with me for the magazine article I was doing, and every photograph he took, he wanted it to be me kicking him, me punching him. Right. It was really generous and humble. And I watched him go across the room. It took him about half an hour to cross the room, because every 5 steps someone stopped him for a photograph, for an autograph.
Well, I think in my opinion, they must have resonated with the truth.
Yeah.
And as you said in the same chapter, you could be anywhere in the world.
One of the Machado students, who was a Green Beret, come over to me and just said, what are you doing? What you're doing? It just was kind of like, it was really like, what you're doing is on the money.
Yeah.
It's right on the money.
That's what I felt when I first got introduced to you. And I think, and that's what you said, that you could be anywhere in the world, and if you're telling the truth, you own the room. Yeah. And if you haven't got the truth, leave, find the truth, and then come back. Yeah,
you shouldn't enter the room without the truth. If you enter the room without the truth, you'll soon find out, because you'll be spat out, especially with discerning people. And then in America, it was like the big thing in America was to be invited to teach for Chuck Norris. It was an invite-only thing, so I knew it was a great honour, and I knew it was taking me onto the world stage, and I knew it would have an effect on me. I didn't realise what a big effect it would have. Had a massive effect afterwards, but I knew it would have an effect.
Meeting Jim Cartwright.
Yeah.
And that was quite interesting, because that was, you were a writer, but it was, meeting Jim took you onto it kind of expanded something in you.
I'd written Watch My Back, and of course that becomes a messenger, that becomes an apostle. It goes out into the world and it says, this is me, this is what I've written, this is my certainty. So it started to attract people. Jim Cartwright was a very famous West End playwright, and he turned up at one of my seminars, and he brought a producer with him called Martin Carr, who didn't want to come, because Martin said, I don't want to go and meet this guy, he's a thug. So Jim said, no, come on, let's have a look. And I did a great demonstration. I spent a lot of time practicing on this demonstration. And I did it with Sharon's brother Alan. He's a brilliant martial artist, and we did this really fun but dynamic demonstration at this seminar in London. And Jim come up to me afterwards and said, I really love Watch My Back, you've really got a voice. And I said, I did what I always do. I just said, give me your address and I'll send you a couple of books. And he goes, that'd be great, yeah. And he said, but I'll send you something of mine. So I sent him some books, and then he sent me his collection of plays. And I didn't realise he was so prolific and so revered. He's supposed to be one of the best playwrights since the war. So I struck up this amazing relationship with Jim, and he encouraged me to go towards theatre. And he wanted me to write Watch My Back into a film. So I started working with Jim and Martin, but Jim also gave me the belief, because he was a working class kid. He was very quiet, very private guy, very, very funny, and wrote the most amazing plays, amazing stuff. He was an Olivier Award winner. So I started working with Jim and Martin, and Jim encouraged me to write a play and send it off to the Royal Court, because it's kind of like the Rolls Royce of theatres for new writers. So I thought I'll send it there, and that got me I got accepted into the Royal Court Writers Group and started working with them. That was at the same time I was in Las Vegas with Chuck Norris, and I started working with Jim on the film, and he started to help me to translate my stuff into theatre, into film. I had a voice, but I didn't know how to translate it into those areas, so it was a massive learning curve. But just being around Jim, just being in his company, And bearing in mind, I didn't force that. You know, I was in his company because I was in that stratosphere. Because of what I was doing, the truth in what I was doing attracted him, who found the truth in something else. So he kind of invited me, you know, kind of introduced me to all this other world. And suddenly I became very excited about writing a play, which I did. The first one I did was Dorman. And, you know, writing films, which the first one I did was Bouncer. And then we did Clubbed with Martin and Jim. And it just started to, you know, Jim introduced me to television people. So that happened over a period of time. But at the same time as I was teaching, making videos, writing books, publishing books, touring books. And I think it's only because I had this, you know, I said to you, I'd been Christed. I'd had this massive amount of energy coming to me. Mm-hmm. And I was able to produce at a prolific rate in lots of areas at the same time. And it was only because of this energy. But this, if anybody got too close to this energy, it really damaged them. It really burnt them, you know. When I did my book tour with Sharon, she was completely burnt out by it because I was having a million ideas a day just rushing into my head. Ideas for, you know, making toys and, you know, doing all of these, just a million ideas that were coming in and rushing in, and I just knew anything was possible. But she said to me one day, you know, you have to stop telling me these ideas. I'm just coping. I'm just coping as it is. Please don't keep, you know. And I wouldn't shut the fuck up. Would I shut the fuck up? Mm-hmm. She ended up in hospital. She ended up in hospital with labyrinthitis. We didn't know what it was, but she just got really ill. And she had to go into hospital on tour. And I sat with her all night until I heard this voice telling me, you know, you've been given this gift and you're not using it properly. You're spilling it. You're wasting it, and you're letting it spill onto people close to you. You've got to respect this energy. This energy is your gift, but it's not your energy. It's a gift to me, but it's not mine. And I've got to be respectful of it.
You have to know how to control it, and you have to know how to let it go little by little. And
this is a good place to put it, Paul.
Yeah.
Put it into a book.
Yes.
This talk is a good place to put it.
After Watch My Back, you said that at one point you lost your voice because you were trying to second guess.
Yeah.
And what I thought was really interesting, you said that you suddenly thought, okay, I need an expensive pen. I need an expensive pad. I can't, you know, factory toilet. I can't go back there.
I've got to go and sit in Lady Herbert's Gardens in Coventry.
So you
stick my hand to my forehead and go, oh.
You'd forgotten what raw was.
Yeah.
And you forgot writing at any cost, that urgency that you had.
Yeah.
So just explain, how did you...
well, I wrote Watch My Back, and it was really popular and it was doing really well. And people were saying it's a strong voice and all the elements they loved, and I just suddenly felt like a writer. So the second book I wrote was Bouncer, which was more stories from the door. Yep. But man, it was a dog's dinner. It was just a dog's dinner. It was full of words I would never use. I was pulling stuff out the dictionary from the thesaurus. I was trying to be a philosopher, and I was probably naturally philosophizing in Watch My Back without knowing it. But I was trying to be a philosopher, and it was just one of my friends, Jamie O'Keefe, rang me and said, "What have you done with my friend Geoff Thompson?" And I was really offended, but he told me the truth, you know, quite a few people just said, you know, this was, you know, Terry O'Neill, not Terry O'Neill.
Was it the broadcaster?
Terry Christian,
okay.
Terry Christian said to me, "It sounds like you're trying to be a philosopher in this," and he loved Watch My Back. Yeah. So a few people were saying to me, "What's gone wrong? This is not right." And when I went through it again, it was hard to hear, but I realised I was being pretentious. I was trying to be a writer. I was just writing things that had no truth in them. I was covering the truth with ostentation. So I went back into it, and on the second draft, on the second rewrite, on the second print, and I rewrote it, and I stripped it right back to the metal again.
But that was also part of your learning.
Part of my development, painful though, Paul.
Yeah, but
it's the second album syndrome, isn't it?
Yeah,
you know.
But at the same time, you try things and they don't work.
Yeah.
And they always say, like, a film director's got a handful of bad films in them.
Yeah.
You just have to get them out of the way. So if you weren't scared to be wrong.
No.
That's the thing. You tried something.
Yeah.
You weren't scared. You know.
It was good because that environment I was in had its own egregore. Yeah. And it just spat it out. It just said, it's not working, it's not happening. So I learned from it. The next book was better. And then as I got better and better, I write poetically anyway, naturally, but I keep it right on the rawness. And as you know, I am very funny, so I make sure that the humour's in there. Well, that comes through quite naturally. The humour tends to come through in the last rewrites, the very last bits.
You win or you learn.
Yeah,
that's the important thing. Like you say, you made no excuses. You looked at it, you thought that doesn't work. And you addressed it. And chapter, we'll go to chapter 12. Where you were invited to the royal court, which was quite an amazing.
I know.
This chapter was really beautiful, and especially the fact that you said the royal court. They didn't teach you format. They didn't teach you how to write. They just identified your voice.
Yeah. And validated it.
Yeah, and that's really important because you don't get that much. Everyone wants to tell you how to do something. They didn't. So tell us about that experience.
Yeah, I was at that stage where I just knew anything was possible. I mean, I didn't realise how much work it would take, but I just knew it was possible. Publishing one book gave me enough certainty to know that anything was possible if it had truth in it. So when I wrote a play, I sent it to the Royal Court, and my friend said to me, "You've sent it to the Royal Court?" And I said, "Yeah." A bit like my Sharon loves this. He says, when I wrote a musical, she said, "I love it when you tell people you've wrote a musical because they'll go, 'Musical?' Like you've written a musical?" And it was like, he went, "Royal Court?" He said, "That's the biggest theatre in the world for new writers." I said, "Yeah, that's why I've sent it there."
Brilliant.
And it's like you should start off low. I thought, well, no, if I'm starting at the Royal Court, of course I'm gonna write to the best of my ability. So I sent it to the Royal Court, and I had a phone call from them and said, "Are you in London often?" And I said, "I can be in London today. I can be in London tomorrow." And they said, "Oh, we'd love to have a chat with you." Anyway, I went down, and they said, "This is really, really great." It was because I sat in this room with a guy called Graham Wyebrow and another guy called Dominic, who were like the artistic directors at the Royal Court. And they were sat in this room, and they said, "See this room? It was just wall-to-wall manuscripts." And I said, "We get thousands of manuscripts from all around the world every year." She said, "We're able to take, we only find a handful of voices each year, and yours is one of them. And we'd like to invite you to the writers group and come in and work for us over the next 6 months." And that's what we did. Again, it wasn't lessons. It was just helping you to identify the voice and sit on the voice and not move from the voice. And they did this amazing exercise, Paul. You've got like paper like this. So you imagine that's like 20 pages like that.
Yeah.
And they said each one of these pages is a page from a well-known playwright, but there's no names on. It doesn't tell you who wrote it. It doesn't tell you the name of the play. It's just pages from these playwrights. He said, this is how we identify the voice. He said, "We should be able to throw these on the floor, and you should pick up any one, and you should be able to know the voice and the author. You should know the author just from the voice. So just from reading the words, their voice should be so individual that you know it just from picking up that paper." And everyone picked up a piece of paper. I picked one up, and I read it, and I said, "That's Jim Cartwright." And it was. Oh, wow. His voice was so distinct. Nice. He said, "That's what we're looking for. You find your voice, it's unique to you, and you sit on it, and you don't deviate from it." He said, "It's so rare, but it can be easily lost. It's not. You wouldn't lose it later. Mm-hmm. You can lose it at the beginning. Like I wrote Watch My Back, and then I lost it. Then I had to recapture it again. And then I learned my lesson from that, never to lose it again. So I love that exercise of like a voice. The voice is a gift, really. It's one of those happy accidents. Yep. And you tend to find it when you do lots and lots of writing. Suddenly it'll click in. I remember reading some stuff to Sharon and said, "Oh, have a listen to this, Sharon." It was from a play I wrote called Three Sacks Full of Hats. I said, "Have a listen to this." And as I started to read it, I started to cry and started sobbing. And I didn't know why. It was just so emotional. And she said, "Oh, you need to make sure that goes on." And it was a play about my brother dying from alcoholism. But there was just lines in there and phrases that I didn't know I knew. And that was the kind of thing, that's the kind of thing you've got to identify and stay with. And I think for a while I was exposed to so many great writers. I think for a while I tried to be Jim Cartwright. Mm-hmm. I think I tried to be Jimmy McGovern. I think for a while I tried to be Paul Abbott. And, they all people like Paul Abbott and Jimmy McGovern and Jim will kick you back into the centre and just say, just stick on your own voice, because that's what's unique. You don't want to be a second or third rate version of me.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
Just stay on your own voice.
Yeah. And that comes through doing the work.
Doing the work, yeah.
You identify, because all of us have heroes in our own chosen art form. You know, I've had directors that I've really admired, and my early work was trying to imitate them. But it was through doing the work that you
find your own sound.
Yeah, because then, you know, there's no other director like David Lynch. There's no other director like Terry Gilliam. They haven't. I mean, although they've been inspired by others.
Yeah.
Through doing their own work.
And you can see their flavours in there, but they've got their own unique voice.
They've developed their voice through doing their own work.
And the voice will turn up. It doesn't have a schedule, it doesn't say, oh, it's the weekend, I won't bother you. You're on holiday, I won't bother you. My first play came to me when I was in Centre Parks, and my whole holiday was spent writing that first play.
Which one was it?
Dorman. It was originally called One Sock.
Yeah.
And so you either sit down and write it, or you miss the muse. You know, I always had a dream of writing I always had a dream of writing a feature for the Times. I wanted to prove to myself I could do it, and I got the offer to do it just before we went on holiday, and I spent the whole holiday writing. But there was a window, so I had to either do it or lose it. But the muse doesn't know about schedules and times and weekends, and it just comes. You either grab it, you either get in its way, or you miss it.
The inspiration comes. And
when it comes, if you don't, it'll go to the hand of some other scribe.
And we'll just we'll kind of wrap it up. Because
thank God I've got some tomato soup over there waiting for me.
Yeah. I mean,
I haven't eaten for 2 hours.
I would say that the rest of the chapters are. I mean, it's a great book. You know, it's just taking. Like you say, it's beautifully put, filling the gaps. That Watch My Back kind of, you know, where it left off. This really fills in the gaps. I wanted just to read one part which I thought summed it up quite beautifully. It's surprising how little money you actually need when you reduce your life to the bare necessities. If you divest yourself of the worthless and the cumbersome robes of accumulation, you'd be inspired by how free, how light, and how happy you are. It is exhilarating, it's liberating. All possessions possess us the moment we feel we have them. I wrote a best-selling book that became a short film and a stage play and a feature film and 1,000 more splendid things from a toilet space in an engineering factory. Be in no doubt you need very little to create.
Yeah.
I think this really sums it up.
That sums it up. That's lovely. Thank you.
Okay.
That was good.
That was good.
That was a whirlwind.
Yeah.